Welcome to Career Biz, the podcast of the University Career Center at UNC Charlotte. I'm Jay.
And I'm Patrick.
Today we're here to talk about the future of work and what the future of work will hold. And gosh, there's a lot of thought about that out there, Patrick. There's a lot of research on it. Read a ton of articles about it. And it's something certainly in the Career Center here, we are staying on top of and trying to stay out in front of as we prepare our candidates for what tomorrow is going to be.
Yeah, and tomorrow, the next year, and the 10 years after that. And Jay, you and I have been geeking out on hundreds of articles, over 3,000 pages of information around what's going to happen. We're almost kind of creating our magic ball, if you will, to figure it out. But let me start off with just a couple things that I've found important for this, quick podcast that we have. So, Rising Tides, Rethinking Education, Work for Humanity 2020. They talk about what the need for the new type of employee in the future is going to be like. And what they say is that the idea of the specialist is going away. And instead, we as candidates have to be agilists, meaning we have to be agile and be able to shift and move around with the amount of new information that's coming in, amount of knowledge, and the jobs that are unknown. And so we often talk about that in career services. Another article that I like is called Robot Ready, Human Skills for the Future of Work. And we always hear that like everything is going to be automated soon. There's going to be robots doing everything. Terminator 2 is coming after us. But I think what they're trying to say is that things will be automated, but we're going to see a huge new classification of jobs that are going to come out that require us to blend these human skills that we have, what we call competencies in the Career Center, with some of those hard skills that are out there. So it's going to be very different, but I think that's why we double down in the Career Center around competencies, because those are hard to develop. You just don't take a class on soft skills and magically you know these. It's a development sort of thing. And the last one I want to mention is it was COVID-19 Virtual Labor, the Future of Work 2020. They said that the shift away from the knowledge worker to the learning worker. And that's big because, we a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the future of higher education, and it's moving away from this idea of you get 120 credit hours and magically you have this bachelor's degree to, you're always going to be learning. You're always going to have to be picking up new skills. You're always going to be crafting new ideas to settle the work that you're doing these days. But future workers, 3 categories. And I thought we would have a conversation around it. The future of the worker, the future of the nature of work that's going to need to be done, and then the future of the work environment. A lot of us are dealing with that right now. So my first question, just for us to banter off on, is let's talk about the workplace, the work environment. Like, what do you think we're going to see in the next 10, 15 years, Jay?
Well, everything I'm reading now, of course, and this has been in response to how we've all worked through the pandemic and things, is that more and more employers are realizing they don't have to have the physical space all the time to accomplish the work that they need to do, but they still need to build camaraderie and communication between people. So I don't think we'll ever totally get away from like having an office environment where everybody lands at some point to meet and talk and be together. But I think what we're going to see much more of going forward is interdisciplinary teams who are spread out across the country or across the globe working on projects together and then moving from a project to another. You mentioned being agilists. And one word that I kept seeing over and over as I read Forbes and Wall Street Journal and Harvard Business Review and Time and all these other places.
Cosmopolitan, all of them.
Everywhere, Mad Magazine, adaptability.
Yeah.
The word adaptability kept coming around. And one thing that employers were pleasantly surprised about was how adaptable their workforce was. Now, they weren't surprised how adaptable their interns were and stuff, because, you guys that are listening to this, that are in school right now, you're the most adaptable people on earth. You're way ahead of us on all the technology and things. You probably taught half of the places you've worked with how to use all the stuff, right? It's how quickly that became to a more of a normal way of operating, and it led to productivity. In fact, there are a lot of studies that are showing productivity has gone up across the American job market in the last year, which is amazing.
Profits, for me.
Yeah, profits are up. Lots of things are moving forward. Why? Because people have adapted well to this work environment. So you're going to see a more and more reliance on that idea that we don't have to have everybody in the same boardroom to get this done. And we were already getting there anyway. But now We really can be in multiple places at once, working on multiple projects at once. So employers are going to be creating workplaces that are capable of responding to change around key strategies. And they've been doing that for years anyway, but now adapting them quickly and being more fluid and less restrained on geography and time are going to be things you see much more of. And so what that means is you're going to have a lot more flexible workspaces. You know, the idea of the 9 to 5 when we were growing up, that's long gone. It's now the 8 to 5 or the 7 to 5. The standard workday really isn't going to be something that I think lasts much anymore. You're going to have people on a lot of different schedules, and being able to live life around that is going to be important.
Well, and I think that's the biggest thing right there is the idea of when will work get done. It's going to completely be fluid and project based, meaning results oriented rather than your butt was in a chair for 8 hours. I'm going to pay you for that. And I think every industry, ours included, and Jay, you and I and the rest of the team have been talking about like how do we allow ourselves to continue this flexibility and still get the job done and serve our students and our employers effectively. It's going to take some time to figure it out, but I think that is the future. Time chunking, meaning I can now be with my kids in the morning and then 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. continue to do some work when they're asleep and still be best of both worlds. And so I'm very excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who's a professional salesperson, and they do all kinds of project tracking as you can manage, and he's worked from home for years. And he says at night, usually between 7 and 9, is when he sits down and he just puts in his updated quote stuff in their HubSpot. That's when he does his admin stuff, because he can sit and do it while he's got his television on. He can chill out in his recliner and do it, and he just pops that kind of stuff in. So the idea of I work these hours and then I'm done, probably not going to be the way of the future anymore. It's going to be much like it is in school, which I think will lend well to the way college has trained people for years. Is you go to class for a little bit of time, then you have a break, and you go to class for a little bit of time, and maybe go to work for a couple of hours, then you go to class. The workplace is going to be a lot like that going forward. And the other thing that you've hit on there, and this is something that's going to be really key, accountability in that process. Keeping up with what I'm doing and where I'm going and how I'm progressing is very key. I mean, we talk about it all the time in the office. We have a strategic plan and we're constantly updating stuff. I was in there updating it this morning, in fact, with like, oh, I've got to work on that, or, oh, that's not going to happen, or whatever. But keeping that kind of material up to date is going to be important for employers and employees to learn how to adapt to. So as a student, how can I do that now and start thinking about it? And that's what I wanted to pitch to you is, how do I start making my time accountable right now when I'm not really having to do it, but I know it's something that I'm going to be required to do going forward?
Well, I think what it is it's an internal motivation. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is that you have to teach yourself how to manage your time effectively, and also teach yourself how to be agile, how to deal with stress when things are just thrown on your plate, but also take a look at what's of most importance, how do you get things done, and the tools that are out there to make your lives easier. I mean, all of us have started picking up new technology, Zoom, and all these different things to find a way to get work done in a very smooth manner. Think about this. It was not more than a year, maybe a year and a couple months ago, that people rarely use Zoom or video conferencing. I mean, people rarely use the internal chat messaging in our office until suddenly we had to, and now everybody uses it and we can get more communication done. It's educating yourself, knowing what's going on. And I think that what we're going to start to see is this movement away from a linear work style to more of a matrixed and connected work style, which brings up the concept that may or may not be bad, but will work go towards more contractual or gig type of economy versus, a stable job of 8 hours a day for each year, salaried sort of thing? I don't know.
It's funny you mentioned that. Business Wire did a report in 2019 called Freelancing in America, and 57 million Americans, 35% of the workforce, freelanced in some capacity that year. That's 2 years ago. Of that group, of the 35% of the workforce, 60% of them said they did it on their own accord. In other words, they chose to do it that way. And another, of the 30 or the 57 million that did it, 28.5 million do it long term. In other words, they freelance for one company, they freelance to another, et cetera. That's up almost 10 million from 5 years previously. Now, that's a lot of numbers. What does that mean? It means more and more people are looking for the short-term contractual consulting type role. And you talked about being agile. Instead of being generalists anymore or being specialists, you're a specialist in this thing for a few moments, then you switch and you're a specialist in another area for a few moments. It's much more around the idea of being interdisciplinary. So if I'm good at biology and analytics and marketing, I can marry those in a real interesting career path for myself and work for a biotech firm, work for a college or university, work for a hospital. I can farm out my ability to do work in a lot of different places. And I think we're only going to see more and more of that.
It's kind of like the stackable credentials that we talked about with higher education. That's where it's moving towards, this idea that you're going to get your foundation general education and then choose your own adventure, sort of thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's going to change the way everything works for a business, the way payroll works, taxes work, the way benefits work, all of that kind of stuff. But before you get to any of that, it's really just adapting to the gig economy. And if you're a student right now, like a lot of our students are, you're working while you're in school because you got to, right? You're paying for school, you're paying for rent, all that kind of stuff. You're thinking, how can I pick up experience? How can I get that? Those gig turnships that we offer through the HireNiner resume book system, you can opt in if you have a resume on HireNiner into a small business gig turnship resume book, or looking for a gig micro internships through something like Parker Dewey or some of these other resources that we promote. Those are ways for you to build your skill set and your social capital and all of that so that you can keep building your skills while you're living to survive right now.
This article I read the other day relating to that, the World Economic Forum 2018 talked about these human skills that we keep talking about and how the growth in jobs in the future are going to be centered around that instead of your very specific, I do code, for example, types of jobs. And, to give you kind of examples, and we've talked about this before, that currently exist that will grow: sales, customer service, marketing, training, those types of jobs where we are trying to blend humans together and build those teamworks and using this thing between our ears called a brain to solve some of the problems. You look at those and say, well, I don't want to be a salesperson. It's not about the position. It's about the function. We're always selling something. Persuasion, negotiation, right? Customer service is always, I'm trying to create that collaboration. That's what customer service is a part of. And so a lot of these jobs that you look at nowadays are out there are really good, solid starting points to many different things. And it gives you skills that a lot of times you're not going to find in the classroom.
Exactly. And look, there are three things that I keep seeing in terms of themes and that employers are saying are great skill sets to buckle onto any degree, anything that you're studying. One is learning how to use data in a smart way. So some bit of data analytics. You don't have to be, a full line data scientist, but you got to learn how to use data to tell the story of what you're doing and how you're doing. Learning how to follow and keep up with your own performance metrics. And we talk about that when we talk about resumes and the bullet points, to try to quantify your experience in some way really sells your understanding of how impactful the role that you're playing is to a potential employer. So knowing that, and then getting a good sense of workplace operations and maintenance, which is all about how you do the things you do and what you do them in. If it's time chunking, if it's, large, scales of time at one time, if it's working in small groups, if it's pulling stuff away, those three things are going to drive forward all of the new futures of work.
Yeah. So if I could kind of sum this up, I'm going to try this and you're going to tell me if this makes sense. Hey, students, get your nose out of your books. Don't just turn off your brains and pretend like you're taking notes of a faculty saying stuff to you. Get engaged, right? Get some research, get some micro internships, get some traditional internships, get out there and find part-time jobs, join clubs and organizations. All these things are really going to prepare you for the future of work, more so than a book will, I promise. Fair enough, Jay?
All of that is very fair. And the other thing I would buckle onto it or whatever is look for the numbers and learn how to interpret them. Ask for those. If you don't see them, even in your group organization stuff that you're doing, create them. Create those outcomes, those measurables. Put that on your resume, your LinkedIn. Put that as part of your vernacular as you're talking in your interviews. It'll just sell yourself going forward, and it will train your brain to look for those things and how to operate in that future world of work.
Fair enough.
Folks, it's been a great time talking about this here on Career Bits. Thank you so much for joining us on this latest episode. You can follow the happenings of the Career Center at career.uncc.edu or on social media at Niner Careers. For Patrick, I'm Jay. We'll talk to you again soon.